Hey guys, I got a Nikon Z camera. The question is, how does it compare to my Leica cameras? Let's take a look. Matt here from MrLeica.com. So if you're new to this channel, normally we talk about Leica cameras, hence the Mr. Leica. But today I've gone back to my roots and we're going to be looking at Nikon photos. I used to shoot Nikon DSLRs before switching over to Leica. I've had the opportunity to test the Nikon Z6 full frame mirrorless camera. So I took it on my recent trip to Lisbon and I'll show you some example photos. We can decide whether or not they're as good as Leica photos. This will be a two-part video. Part one, I'll talk mostly about the camera itself. Then part two will be Voigtlander 50mm f2 Apo VM like M mount versus Voigtlander 50mm f2 Apo Z mount. So the Z mount lens will obviously be on the Nikon Z6. And I've got the M mount lens on the M240, so we can see how they compare. That's part two, so subscribe if you want to see that. This is going to be more about the usability of a Nikon camera compared to Leica cameras, and that includes M cameras and the Leica SL, and I'll also include Lumix cameras as well because I've got those. Let's take a look. Okay, so the Nikon Z6 was released in 2018, and it's a 24 megapixel full frame mirrorless camera, similar to my, say, Leica SL or Lumix S5 camera. It's got all the pretty much mod cons and usual features, but it does have a few differences. Battery catch is not quite like a standard. It's a bit crappy made, but it uses a CF Express B-type card, not an SD card. In terms of size, here's the Nikon Z6 next to my Lumix and Leica SL. If you see them side by side, the Nikon is slightly shorter than the Lumix and shorter and smaller than the Leica. If we look at the Lumix S5 to the Nikon Z6 first, the Z6 is 675 grams, whereas the Lumix is only 714 grams. The screen is slightly bigger on the Nikon. Compared to the Leica is 847 grams, so quite a bit heavier and bigger in kind of most dimensions. It's nicer built and feels a lot more premium feeling, but I probably would say that because I'm a Leica guy. But yeah, less rubber, less plastic, and yeah, a bit more of a solid build. Okay, so now talking about the screens. So the screen on the Nikon does pull out, and you can shoot kind of looking down at it or looking up at it a little bit, but it's pretty much useless if you're trying to shoot in portrait orientation, which is how I shoot. The Lumix screen is far better because you can close it to protect the screen. It fully rotates, and like that you can shoot in portrait orientation. So if you want a screen, get a Lumix over the Nikon. It's far better for the screen capabilities. If you like flappy, tilty screens, don't look at Leica's because the SL screen is obviously fixed. Okay, next, the more important thing, how about the viewfinders? So Lumix first. So this is the view of the world when looking through the Panasonic Lumix S5. The Panasonic Lumix only has a 2.3 megapixel resolution viewfinder, which means it's not the best. I prefer to use the Leica for this reason. Okay, next the Nikon. So the Nikon has a 3.69 resolution viewfinder, which is the same as the Lumix S5 version 2. This means it's much clearer to see through and easier to manual focus lenses like the 50 f2 Apo. What about my favourite Leica SL camera? This has the 4.4 megapixel higher magnification viewfinder, making it so easy to manually focus any manual focus lens, as you can see here. Okay, so how would a Leica photographer use these various different camera brands? I have my Lumix S5 set to manual. I press the joystick to zoom in my view. I will critically focus on the lens, take my shot. With the Nikon Z6, it's not quite so easy. Obviously turn it on, set it into manual mode, turn off auto ISO, so everything's full manual. To zoom in, I have to press the small plus button several times to critically focus. I then have to press the minus button to zoom out to compose, then take a shot. With the Leica SL, this is the best choice for me. Everything's manual again. I'll press the joystick once to zoom in, or focus, take the shot. So that's by far the fastest. So that was using the camera. What about the actual pictures? Can you take pictures as good as Leica photos with a cheaper Nikon camera? Let's go to Lisbon and lots of example photos coming up. Okay, so before we go to Lisbon, let's just quickly recap on the equipment that I used for my trip. So I took the Leica M240 because that's my camera of choice for street photography, because as you can see it's much smaller in all dimensions than mirrorless cameras, full frame mirrorless cameras. And I had the obviously 50 f2 apo on both systems. Here you can see the cameras side by side for like a size check. And for rangefinder cameras, they are so quick to use. Turn it on, set your aperture, focus, click, go, done. Okay, time to head out into Lisbon. I stayed centrally in like a hostel hotel type thing where I've got a private room but reasonably affordable, and that gave me access to most of the city on foot, and I just walked a lot. Roughly 25 to 28,000 steps a day, with both the billion bag full and a backpack full as well, because I was testing digital versus digital and film versus film. That to come in a following video. So these are all black and white photos shot with the Nikon Z6, and all they are raw photos with a Mr. Leica black and white preset applied. If you want access to these presets that I use for the Nikon Z6, I can put a link below. They're like modified presets from my other cameras, modified to work to get a Leica look that I want from this camera. Pretty happy with the photos. They don't look dissimilar to Leica photos from my eyes, and yeah, pretty pleased on the whole. No complaints, and I knew I loved this lens. I even approached a few strangers, made myself to try and ask if I could take their pictures. This is a bit out of my comfort zone despite being a model photographer. That girl actually approached me, which was a nice change. Okay, next, colour photos. So warning alert, this is going to be a lot of tram photos coming up. The reason I chose Lisbon is I like the older cities with trams and old stuff to photo, because I was going to be shooting a lot of film as well as digital, and that's kind of a look that a thing that I like to photograph on film. So again, all photos are shot with a Nikon Z6. Again, these are raw plus this time a colour preset that I made, and the colour preset's inspired by the slide film that I was using in the other cameras. So the colour photos have got a bit more pop than perhaps, say, if you shot portrait or more of a bland film. This is Ollie. I stopped him and said, please can I take a picture because your skateboard matches the yellow wall. I just walked a lot to look for anything I could find. I asked this girl if I could take a picture as well. And then obviously different parts of the day we had different light. The sunsets in Lisbon were really nice for light, especially for shooting colour film, for example, like this, although these are obviously digital pictures. After dark, digital is better than film, and I feel like I should go back and shoot some of these again on various film stocks because the scenes just looked amazing. Big fan of the trams, and you'll see more in the film related videos to come. So on the final morning I had one quick mini walk around. It was a Sunday, so everything was quite quiet, maybe a Saturday, I forget. And then I googled local camera shops and found the Vintage Dream camera shop, and I just thought, I took all my bags because it was on the way to the airport, and I just stopped in to say hello and said, hey, I like old cameras, how you doing, kind of thing, can I have a look? And they had a really good selection of like cool old cameras, and the owners were just amazing. They gave me like a tour of the whole place. They've got a dark room at the back and enlargers and so much kit. So if you live in Lisbon and you ever have any interest in film cameras, definitely check these guys out. They're so nice. They even took me for dinner before I went to the airport. I'll put a link to their shop below, and yes, I'll definitely be going back to say hello. This is probably the point in the video where most cool YouTubers cut to the hipster lo-fi beats, but I haven't actually got any, so I'll just show you around. Yeah, they're hoping to maybe feature local artists' work on the walls in the future, and here they are in action. I pressured them to take a few pictures. Here's a clip of what's coming in a future video, so this will be coming from me, so stay tuned for that. So those are the photos. If you want to see the head-to-head photos, like for like, and Leica next to Nikon, see the next video. And I must say a huge thanks to Flaghead Photographic, because not only did they send me the Nikon Z6 camera, they also sent me the Voigtlander Z mount 50 f2 apo lens to go on the camera, and then they also sent me the battery charger and a CF card reader. All my cameras use standard SD cards. So massive thanks to Flaghead Photographic, going above and beyond, and this is not a sponsored video. They just gave me the opportunity to show you guys what a Nikon can do compared to a Leica. As always, a massive thanks to my awesome patrons. Part 2 coming up very soon.